So I'm Evan Watkins. I'm our head of content and community at LEADx. For those of you who don't know, LEADx helps companies deliver digital leadership development. We offer training programs for 80 plus competencies and skills. And this, of course, includes SL2, a situational approach to leadership. We'll get into this in more detail later, but for now, I wanted to note that we're offering a public SL2 workshop in May. I'll drop a link in the chat in a moment here. And outside of the public workshop, you can also work with us to deliver an SL2 program at your company at any time. But for now, I want to pass the mic to Kevin Thomas. Kevin, in addition to being my friend, is a certified SL2 coach and the head of OD at LEADx. He's an ex-Google OD practitioner and an ICF certified leadership coach. Kevin, how's it going?
Going good, Evan. Thank you so much. Always feels great to be introed by you. Welcome in, everyone. I'm very excited for this webinar. We've got a lot of ground to cover here in the next 30 minutes, and I'm sure you're going to appreciate us jumping right in so that we can have as much time as possible to understand the SL2 model and the SL2 experience program, and also hopefully have some time for some Q&A at the end. So let's jump in and get started. So what can you expect out of this webinar? Well, first, we're going to, of course, as L&D professionals, start off with some learning objectives. We'll then talk about some of the stats and research behind why SL2 was created and what some of those impacts are from implementing in organizations. Then we'll talk about the model itself, so you'll have a foundational understanding of those concepts. And then we'll jump into the SL2 experience, breaking down the 4-phase learning process that's involved, and then how you can incorporate SL2 experience within your organization. So starting with those learning objectives, after completing this webinar, you'll be able to describe how SL2 drives business outcomes. You'll be able to explain SL2 experience program and the foundational concepts that are involved. And you'll be able to describe how the SL2 experience can be added to your leadership development programs. As promised, let's start with some of those statistics. We'll start with one of the more popular ones that most of you are probably familiar with. Only 30% of US employees are engaged at work, and managers account for at least 70% of the variance in employee engagement. Another statistic that isn't so popular, 58% of US employees say poor management is the biggest thing getting in the way of their productivity. So we see a huge draw towards employee engagement and productivity as it relates to the impact we have as leaders. One more here, 54% of leaders use only one leadership style regardless of the situation. So what does this mean? 50% of the time or more, leaders are using the wrong leadership style for meeting the needs of their people. Using only one leadership style doesn't create meaningful connections. Research shows that employees need different levels of direction and support depending on their level of competence and commitment. But most managers use only one leadership style, and the results are costly. We're talking turnover, disengagement, diminished productivity, missed opportunities, and much more. A McKinsey report released in 2017 titled "What's Missing in Leadership Development" highlights this issue and the need for a more flexible, situational approach to leadership. Blanchard's leadership shows that 54% of leaders only use one leadership style, regardless of the situation, which means they're often using the wrong leadership style for meeting the needs of their people. So think of a situation when one of your previous managers didn't use the correct leadership style to meet your needs. Maybe they were giving you too much direction when what you really needed was support. Or maybe when you needed direction, you were just told, "Oh, I'm not worried about it. You'll figure this out. I believe in you." This is exactly what SL2 addresses: how to not only teach leaders about the different styles, but also how to recognize where a team member is at on a particular task so they can be a more nimble and effective leader. SL2 is about addressing the natural needs in an organization that result in the consequences I just mentioned. So think about this. What would it be like in your organization to have a global language for leadership? What would it be like for team members to ask their managers for the direction and support that they need? and when they
Is this
need it,
your listing?
and when they need it
Is your
on
li-
specific tasks, and when they don't need it. Both of those outcomes are achieved when you implement the SL2 experience. SL2 is the most widely used leadership development model in the world today. Some of the best organizations in the world, small and large, rely on this model because it works. This webinar here is a preview of Blanchard's newest flagship leadership development program, the SL2 Experience. It's named the SL2 Experience to emphasize that learning is not a one-time event, but it's an experience that happens over time. It uses engaging, innovative learning techniques that immerse learners in SL2 quickly, deeply, and effectively. So let's break down the two images you see here on the slide and learn more about the actual SL2 model. Now, I want to start with the development levels. So you see there's 4 different development levels. We'll start here on the right-hand side with D1, development level 1. A person who is considered to be at D1 on a specific goal or task has low competence and high commitment. So think of a new hire. Think of someone who's new to a task. A lot of excitement, a lot of enthusiasm, not a lot of knowledge, maybe not a lot of skills directly applied to that skill or to that task. A person who's considered to be at D2 on a goal or task has low to some competence and low commitment. So now they've kind of gotten out of the point of, I don't know what I don't know. And they're starting to figure out that, or they're starting to realize what they don't know and how much of it they have to learn. Their competent or their commitment has gone down. Their competence has slightly gone up. A person who's considered to be at D3 on a goal or task has moderate to high competence and variable commitment. They have more knowledge, more skills related to this task or goal, but they're not fully confident yet. Sometimes they may believe that they can complete the task effectively. Sometimes they may doubt themselves more often. And then a person who's considered to be at D4 on a goal or task has high competence and high commitment. Now, it's important to understand, you all hear when I keep saying at D3, at D2. It's important to understand that a person is not a development level. Whether we're talking SL2, any other kind of personality assessment, we are not labels, right? We are at a development level on a specific task at a certain point in time. Learning these key terms for development levels 1 through 4 is about learning a new language for leadership. So let's talk now about those leadership styles to match with each of those development levels. Each style is a unique combination of 2 leadership behaviors, direction and support. So you see style 1 here, also labeled directing, high directive behaviors, low supportive behaviors. S2, also known as coaching, high direction, high support. S3, low direction, high support. And finally, S4, delegating, low supportive behaviors, low directive behaviors. Now notice at the bottom of the slide here, low does not mean no. Low direction in S3, as you can see here, S3 and S4 doesn't mean no direction, right? So this is kind of a pitfall, a trap that we can all fall into as leaders of thinking, oh, you know, Evan on my team, he's so great at doing this. I'm just going to hand this off to him. He knows what to do. I know he can get it done. Here you go, Evan. Low doesn't mean no. We still also want to provide support. We still want to recognize Evan's skills, his abilities in that process. We don't necessarily have to focus in on it, but it is still very valuable and important that we mention. Same goes for S2 and S1 when it comes to, for S1 when it comes to support. So we don't want to provide no support. Even though our team member may be very enthusiastic, very excited to do the task, we still want to recognize that. That's their strength in that moment. So let's break down these styles even further so we could be more specific around what high and low actually means for each style regarding supportive and directive behaviors. In style 1, there's much more direction. In an effective style 1 conversation, the leader probably talks about 70% of the time. In style 2, it's about 50% direction, 50% support. There's more explaining instead of defining, more clarifying instead of telling. The leader and team member probably talk about 50% of the time each. In style 3, there's more support. You encourage, you remind the person of past successes, and then you listen to his or her ideas. The leader probably talks about 30% of the time in these conversations. Lastly, in style 4, the team member provides his or her own direction and support in the conversation. In an effective style 4 conversation, the team member should actually be the one talking about 70 to 80% of the time. So here's an example to illustrate this a bit more. Let's all pretend that a group of people in the hall are talking loudly and causing a big distraction. As a leader, I'm going to tell my team member, Greg, to address the situation. So let's go through each of these 4 leadership styles for this situation to notice the difference of approach and communication. In style 1, I'd say, hey, Greg, there's noise in the hall. I want you to take care of it. Can you please go down the hall, tell those people that they're making too much noise and that it's bothering us, and then ask them to move their conversation down the hall? Is it clear what I need you to do? Can you do it right now, since this has already been going on for about 15 minutes? Let me know how it goes, and if they cooperate, it'll be fine. If not, we'll need to come up with another plan. So what do you all think? Let me know in the chat real quick. Do you think this is a good plan to address this situation? What do you think? Matt says, only if they don't know what to do. Only if you're dealing with an intern who has no experience dealing with confronting people. Seems like overkill. Yeah, the point here is that it might be, right? It depends. It depends on who's involved, what their skill level is, many different factors. It could be a great option though. Notice here that it's my plan. I named the problem. I came up with the solution. The person that I'm directing, Greg, is only responsible for carrying out my plan. In style 2, I changed things around a bit differently. I'd say, Greg, there's noise in the hall. It's really impacting our meeting. I'm going to take someone with good interpersonal skills like you to handle this. What I'd like to suggest is that you go into the hall, you tell those people that they're making too much noise and that it's bothering us, and ask them to move their conversation down the hall. What do you think? Up until this point, the conversation looks a lot like style 1. Continuing in style 2, let's assume that after I ask Greg for his input, he replies, those people look really mean. And I don't think they're going to cooperate. Why don't I just ask security to come down and ask them to leave? Now, at this point, you have 2 suggestions on the table, right? You have yours to just take care of it. And then you have Greg's, which is to call security. So who decides in this situation? Well, the leader makes the decision, and the leader also explains why explains the why behind once they make their decision. So continuing in S2 here, if I think that Greg's idea is a good one, I'd say, that seems reasonable. I knew I could count on you. You have a good relationship with security. Let me know if you have any problems. If I don't think Greg's plan is a good idea, then I would redirect by saying, my concern is that security will take too long. So why don't you take a couple of other people with you and ask those folks to move down the hall. So what do you all think? Is this a good style? The S2 approach for this situation. Christine says good for S2. Again, it depends. Yes, Linda. It depends on the situation, depends on numerous variables and factors here. So let's move into style 3. What does style 3 look like? I'd say, Greg, there's too much noise in the hall. What could you do to take care of it? I'd then listen to Greg's ideas and let's assume that he suggests calling security, and I think it's a bad idea. I could say, my concern is that they might take a lot of time getting here. What do you think? What other ideas do you have? I'd ask good questions until he came up with a viable solution. Then I'd acknowledge his initiative and resourcefulness. Lastly, for style 4, I'd simply say, Greg, there's too much noise in the hall. Could you take care of it? Then I'd acknowledge his initiative and contribution by thanking him. The point is that there's 4 very viable options for dealing with the noise in the hall, right? Someone can take any 4 of those different approaches. The leader's behavior is different depending on the development level of the person on this specific task. Generally, the 4 styles should sound like S1, here's what I want you to do. S2, here's what I suggest. What do you think? S3, how will you take care of the noise in the hall and how can I help? And then S4 is simply, there's noise in the hall. You decide how to take action here. In S1, in style 1, the leader decides what, how, and when. In style 2, the leader and team member talk, and then the leader decides and explains why behind the decision. In style 3, the leader and team member also talk here. Together, they decide what and when, but the team member is the one who decides the how. And then lastly, in style 4, the team member takes the lead in decision-making about what, how, and when. Now, in all 4 styles, a leader sets goals, so they align with the person that he or she is leading on goals, development level, and leadership style. The leader also stays connected, right? So we delegate tasks. We don't dump tasks on someone. We want to stay connected, have check-in meetings, monitor performance. And then we also, of course, want to provide continuous feedback. Now in SL2, there's 3 skills primarily honed in on. The first is goal setting. The second is diagnosing. And the third is matching, which drives alignment and ultimately goal accomplishment. The first being goal setting. This involves being able to write SMART goals to establish clear agreements about what's to be done and when it's to be done by. It's also being able to negotiate SMART goals through alignment conversations with team members at all levels of development. Diagnosing goes back to the development levels. So as a leader, being able to identify the characteristics and the needs of others at each level of development. How do I know if my team member is at D1 or D3 on this task, right? So we walk through the different identifiers for each. Also being able to accurately diagnose those development levels of others on each specific goal or task they must perform. And lastly, matching. So becoming flexible leaders who can use all 14 directive and supportive leadership behaviors to build others' competence and commitment. Be able to adjust their leadership style when competence and commitment either increases or decreases. Be perceived as effectively able to match and use the appropriate leadership style for each development level. And then lastly, be able to comfortably use the common language of SL2 to increase the quality and quantity of conversations. So let's look at what SL2 implemented within an organization has resulted in. The name we're all familiar with here, Nissan, globally been using SL2 and other training programs since 2005, impacting more than 17,000 employees in 35 plus countries and over 13 languages. Nissan started delivering SL2 in North America, had massive success, decided to expand globally, and then became Nissan's mandated course for leadership training. With SL2 specifically, they've conducted multiple ROI studies. The results on this slide reflect a study from 2019, and the results are consistent with all previous studies conducted on SL2. So what they found was a 452% ROI, return on investment. 90% of participants were more engaged in their role as a result. And then 95% of participants applied new learnings with direct reports. Another impact study. As the second largest pharmaceutical company in the world, This organization is not only an industry leader, but also a household name in the scientific and drug discovery industry. They found 7 to 10% improvement in recognition, flexibility, morale, as well as a 50% increase in productivity, 50% reduction in project completion times without increasing staff, and then 65% of participants reported that they felt they learned new and valuable skills. So what is the SL2 experience program as a whole? It's broken up into 4 different phases. So the first here, launch. The launch phase of this program is all of the pre-work prior to any of the live sessions. Typically about 45 minutes to an hour's worth of pre-work. Usually you have anywhere from 2 to 4 weeks to complete this before the first session begins. You'd be introduced to a video on SMART goals. You'd also complete what's called the LBA2 assessment, where you'd go through an assessment and then find out what your natural leadership style is out of the 4, as well as a couple of other activities as well. Then the learn phase of this portion of this program starts during the first 2 sessions. This is all about being introduced to the concepts, some of which I've gone over: the skills, the model itself, development levels, leadership styles. Then you move into the final 3 sessions that are involved. So this provides an opportunity to actually practice these concepts, practice these new skills with one another in a group cohort setting. And last phase here is master. So this is the sustainment after the live workshops have concluded. So what does this look like? Let's map it out as a timeline here. What does it look like with LEADx? So as I mentioned, you have the launch portion here with the pre-work. You then jump into the first live workshop, the learn session number 1. At the end of that, we would launch LEADx, so get participants set up. They can start receiving personalized nudges based on their natural leadership style. There's pre-work in between each of the 5 sessions. Then there's the 3 practice sessions to really hone in, craft those skills related to situational leadership. And then after the final SL2 session, they're set up for a monthly or 1 month micro learning type of experience, where they're provided with different activities to help reinforce their learning around SL2, around their leadership style, as well as other potential leadership styles they can leverage. And then we come back together after a month for a 1-hour group coaching session. So what insights have you gained? What are some challenges that you're experiencing related to your natural leadership style? Provides a space for folks to come back together, work through any challenges that they're still experiencing. Here's a quick preview of what some of those micro-learning activities look like, as well as a nudge that would be involved here. So I would say something, if I was natural S3 leadership style, say, Kevin, your primary SL2 style is S3, and you like to collaborate. Try to step back and let your team work independently if they're competent and committed. So it provides an opportunity to reinforce strengths and also point out, make leaders aware of potential derailers, as well as potential blind spots. The last part here of within LEADx is our live coach live chat feature. It's the ability to chat directly with an ICF certified coach, anything related to leadership, but also specifically SL2 throughout the program. So if a specific situation comes up, you want to run through, brainstorm ideas, or ask direct questions on how to address a situation, all leaders, all participants would have the ability to do that. Evan mentioned that we're offering a public workshop soon here in a couple of months. These are the dates and times if you'd like to lock those in. We also have a sign-up link here. If you are interested in joining us, like I said, total is 11 hours worth of live SL2 training workshop. numerous reinforcement resources, materials, different activities, 1 month exclusive access to the LEADx platform, $18.95 a person. Evan will drop the link for this in the chat. Thank you, Evan. You can also visit that, share with your team members or colleagues if you or they are interested. And of course, reach out to myself or Evan at any time. We're happy to chat, or if you have additional questions about SL2, happy to hop on a call as well and talk through those. Now, I also want to open it up a bit for some questions before we wrap up. So what questions do you have about SL2? Any questions?
Hey, Kevin, Michael here. So I'm assuming from what I'm gathering is that this training, this 11-hour training, is to train the coaches, and then we train our people, or is this something that you bring in our people and then you train them as well?
Yeah, so this is direct to the leaders. There is a train the trainer program, which I'd be happy to talk more with you about that if that's something you're interested in. But this program that I just described is something that we would go in and set up cohorts, groups with all of your employees, your managers to participate in this.
Kevin, a couple questions in the chat that I'll highlight for you. One from Danny. She asked, what would the target audience for SL2 be? Entry level or mid-level? Question mark.
Yeah, great question, Danny. Looking like I mentioned earlier, SL2 is about creating a language within an organization for leadership. So that's immediately where my mind goes. All levels of leadership. The more that everyone can get on the same page and learn how to communicate not only their needs, but also to be able to be aware of what others' needs may be in a certain situation, the more effective that everyone can be, as leaders, but also as direct to their managers as well. What else?
There's another question. I don't know the answer to this one, but it's what's the difference between SL1 and SL2?
I believe, yeah, I can probably half answer this. So my understanding is the experience portion in terms of this is not just a one-time event anymore. There's a lot of reinforcement tools. There's a lot of pull through, and also the additional component of all of the LEADx functionalities that I mentioned there to also help with the pull through. It's now about creating an experience as opposed to a one-time workshop, one and done. What else?
So someone asked how ROI was measured. I'm not sure if they mean in that case study or in general.
Yeah,
But I
I
think
could.
in that, yeah, go ahead.
If you could just take a note of who that was, I can, and if you'd be open, or if we already have your email, I'm sure we probably do. I can follow up after this. I think the ROI is measured slightly different depending on why SL2 was brought into the organization. So I have access to the full report, the full analysis behind each of these impact studies. So I can provide you with more details after this session.